Welcome everyone to the next episode of Impactables with Rishav. Today we have Aman Singla, Head of Transaction Banking Group of CSB Bank. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Rishav. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much. Definitely this is one segment which we covered around 3-4 episodes till now in our channel. It's always glad to have someone who is having 20 years of experience in this space and being able to, it's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start with, so in this entire past 2 decades, what you have been in this banking industry, the changes what you saw from 2005 till 2025, how do you feel like the changes?
So Rishav, first of all, I just want to say that all views are my personal views, so it's nothing to do with my employer right now. Okay, but eventually, yeah, in the last 2 decades, things have undergone a sea change. Just to put in one word, both in terms of the way the businesses have evolved, the way the banking has evolved, the way the banking products, solutions, the way of doing business has evolved. So it has been mind-boggling, and it is, if I want to speak about last 2 decades, the time that we have will be too short to even talk about that. That's the kind of change we have seen in the last 2 decades, and I'm sure this is just the beginning, because I think this entire thing was accelerated because of the COVID that we went through in 2020, where everything became digital and everybody started talking about digital. Thing which would have taken about 6-7 years prior to COVID happened in a year's time, or even lesser than that. But in terms of the transaction banking as a business, so just to give you a little bit of brief on what transaction banking is all about, because people may not know what transaction banking is all about. So transaction banking has always been there in the bank, but in different form and shape, right?
It is not visible to everyone.
Yeah, that is one, and it's been there, but in a different form and shape. It was never called as transaction banking. It was probably called as cash management somewhere, as trade finance somewhere, as custody business somewhere, as supply chain business somewhere, or as a part of working capital somewhere. But when you put all this together, is when you say it's transaction banking as a business segment. And I have seen in a lot of places where the value of transaction banking was never there, but it was always there for the bank to ensure that the business keeps running. Either it's on operational side, or whether it is on the advisory side, or on the regulatory side, because transaction banking is very, very regulatory compliant business. Any single chance of a compliance going wrong, you can be pulled up by the regulator very, very easily, right? So to ensure that the banks continue to run the business in a compliant, regulated way, the relevance of transaction banking actually has gone up in the last couple of years. More so, it's become digital, and because of which the cybersecurity also becomes very important. So I think in the last 2 decades, change that we've seen is been from paper-based to digital, and then to compliance and regulatory compliance, and then to cybersecurity, which is also an offshoot of.
Now we only hear about compliance. This is one thing which was, I think in 2015 to 2020, there was not this terms used because that UPI thing was coming, people were using it. But now, 24-25, only compliance.
No, I think compliance was always there, but again, as a transaction, it never came to the forefront. Then when RBI actually started, looking at pushing banks and entities, and probably with the fintechs coming in, compliance became very, very important, because there were certain instances where fintechs were using regulatory arbitrage to what RBI was doing for regulated entities to unlike a fintech, they were using that regulatory arbitrage to build the business, right, or to grow the business. So RBI said, do business, no problem at all, but it has to be complied. And the way the banks do, it has to be run in that fashion, and it has to be in the letter and spirit of what RBI says.
And we come to this particular segment. How big is the, for example, in banking, we know that there are branches been operated by, say, suppose any bank. Any bank has a branch, they has a branch manager,
correct,
teller, and the cash manager, etc. In any bank, how big is the team size or the thing in the transaction banking? How big is the team or big segment?
So the transaction banking team size is a function of how big the business team is, right? So normally, if I don't look at operations piece, I only look at the RM, transaction banking RM advisory perspective. Then if you look at 3 different businesses, which is your trade finance, which is your supply chain, which is your cash management, which including payments, and your security business, which is your depositories and capital market business.
We will break down. So this 4 you have told.
Yeah.
The first was trade finance.
Trade finance.
So simple, small example of trade finance for the generic audience, because this word will be not everyone used day-to-day life. So can you tell me a simplest example of trade finance?
Okay, so simplest example of trade finance would be, for example, so it has 2 parts. One is cross-border transaction, where I want to make a payment, I want to import something from overseas and I want to make a payment for that, right? So that can be done either through my own funds or I take finance from the bank. Okay, so if I do a finance from the bank, it's called a trade finance. But if I'm using my own funds to make a payment, it's called my cross-border transaction, which I'm doing it.
The one which, suppose I'm making a payment to a US entity.
From your own funds, you will do a cross-border transaction,
Okay.
right? But if you're using finance from a bank, it's called trade finance, backed by a forex flow, which is cross-border transaction.
How one can avail that finance? For example, in a business, suppose I am doing a business in India and I'm importing goods from US, and say suppose I'm doing a monthly turnover of say, suppose 1 crore rupees, and it's a rotating money in my bank. What will take for me to get that financing?
So every bank has its own credit assessment model for each customer. But thumb rule is normally banks do ask for 3 years of balance sheet of the customer, profitable balance sheet. And basis that, depending on their working capital requirements, they give the limits to the customer. Once that is done, then the customer can avail those limits under various trade finance products that we can offer to the client.
Okay. So first was trade finance, second was
cash management.
Cash management.
Which is, so basically if you look at it, cash management is a very generic term that we use. It does not mean that I deal with cash, but it's it's basically payments and movement of money, right? So cash management is an overarching term. It's all about movement of money. It can be collections or payments, whether I get it, whether it's receivable or it's payable. Only 2 things are there.
But what type of people or whatever businesses use this? Like
all businesses. Today, if you are a businessman, right? You will have to make a payment to somebody.
Correct.
And you have to receive a payment from somebody. That itself comprises of cash management or payments, payables or receivables.
Correct.
That we call as cash management. So even if you look at trade also, cross-border also, it is also about paying and receiving, importing and exporting. So ultimately it is all about money movement, whether from domestic or cross-border. So from a simplistic term, we say cash management, but it is all about money coming to your account and money going out of your account. So that's the way it is.
But which industry as a whole use it more frequently? For example, service basis there. They are the simplest thing, money in, money out. But there might be complex business, be it real estate or suppose investment, wealth managers, or when someone is raising money from institutional investors, that money is coming. So these are complex things which happens. Is there a bigger use case?
No, so there are use cases in every industry, right? So as you said, the use case will vary from industry to industry and transaction to transaction. But simply put, money coming to your account and going out of your account will comprise of cash management. Yes, if it is for example, you have to make an investment overseas, right? I'll have to follow RBI guidelines on how do I make that investment.
Okay.
It will go through a banking channel, right? So that is again cross-border movement of funds.
But it's not direct.
Direct in the sense?
Direct, for example, I need to follow some kind of...
Yeah, you have to follow the RBI guidelines for that. So anything today in India is current account convertible. I can do, based on certain current account transactions, I can do on my own. But there are certain RBI guidelines which I need to follow, right? So I have to follow those guidelines. As a bank, I have to ensure that we do not deviate from those framework and the guidelines given by RBI.
Interesting. So, but as an individual, for where do I get stuck? Which is more difficult piece is like, suppose there was a scenario with me as an individual, not a business owner. There was a scenario where I wanted to invest in, suppose an overseas entity based out of Europe, and it was not easy to transfer. Like, for example, if I want to transfer money to my friend or my relatives to US or UK, I can transfer right away, but just by doing wire transfer or NRI, any account.
Correct.
But when it comes to investing in an unlisted company, it requires some kind of a document. So it doesn't happen quickly. So is there any way, possibility that this can become more simpler in the coming times and can be digitalized?
So I think it has been simplified by RBI to a large extent. Earlier, this was something which was not even allowed by RBI. You had to go to RBI for approval and then do that. But now it is getting simplified to some extent. And obviously, it'll take over a period of time, it will get a lot more simplified and it will become a lot more digital as and when we move towards capital account convertibility. But it will happen, right? But as of now, we will have to follow what RBI guidelines are. Even if it is a little painful for the customer, it has to be. But it is all in the interest of the person and the bank and overall as a country.
Okay. So now talking about you as an individual, you have seen a massive shift. Like people were dealing in cash, then they started dealing in checks, then they started dealing in UPI. Now people dealing in various different bonds and all those things are coming in the market. For you, was it very difficult to adopt to these technologies? You faced any problem as an individual, or like it was like on the go kind of a thing for you?
So if you don't change with the changing environment, then you get stuck, right? So even if I didn't want to, I had to, because I have to, we have to continue working, and so that's the way it has to be. So the only thing we have always heard that statement, the only thing constant is change, right? And if you don't change, you will fall by the by the side. So I think it's very important for us to keep changing, keep learning, and keep moving. And also sometimes you have to also understand that you may not have all the answers to what is happening around you, right? So you will also have to depend on people whom you think are much better, able to explain those things. So there should be no shame in asking if you don't know anything, right? Correct. If you don't do that, you'll never learn. If you don't learn, you'll never change. So I think it's been a learning experience. It's been an experience that has helped me reach where I am. Otherwise, if I had not learned, I would have stuck to what I was doing earlier. So I think it's very, very simple.
Or the people will say that term that AI will replace you, kind of a thing. So, but in this overall journey as a whole, like there must be scenarios where, suppose in 5 years or 6 years before, explaining someone transaction banking was difficult as compared to 2025. It is easier, I believe.
I think people knew, but they didn't know the terminology. They knew कि ये कुछ काम बैंक में होता है ऐसा.
वो कैसे समझाते थे, मतलब कि ऐसा कुछ कोई funny incident, कोई funny scenario ऐसा कुछ
हुआ? So no, we used to never go and tell the customer, sir, we are from transaction banking like that. So we'll say, sir, आपकी जो requirement, आपकी जो problem है ना, we'll try and solve that problem. So that problem would fall within transaction banking, but he will not know it's transaction banking. For him, it would be trade finance, it could be cash management, it could be working capital, it could be capital markets, could be anything. So we should never go and say, sir, हम transaction banking का बताना है कुछ आपको. उसकी जो problem है, we should understand that and resolve that issue. So that is where you used to create that kind of a situation with the customer. But now I think over a period of time, people have started understanding what transaction banking is all about. The importance of it, because today trade finance or cash management or supply chain, it helps you optimize your working capital. It helps you manage your liquidity. Right? So we used to tell them, sir, if for example, if you have 5 accounts, for example, with different banks.
5
right?
Current accounts, right?
Correct. 5 accounts. And in one account, you having running a CCOD, which is you are using that money, but in the other account, you are having excess funds.
Okay.
Right? So you are not getting anything on that current account, money is lying there. So we should tell them, please move that money to this CCOD account so they can reduce your interest cost. Right?
और वहाँ पर उसने CCOD लिमिट को यूटिलाइज करके रखा हुआ है.
Correct. और उसको पता नहीं कि मेरा पैसा यहाँ एक्स्ट्रा पड़ा हुआ है. So you tell him you move that money here so that your interest costs come down and your liquidation comes down. Right?
But as a business, तो मेरे को अगर 2 account है, मेरे को पता रहेगा ना कि मैंने.
Sir, if you are completely involved and you know, sometimes a lot of people who don't know कि वहाँ पे excess पैसा पड़ा हुआ है. Now, because of this, people are getting to know it. You would get statements on a regular basis, on a daily basis across banks, right?
पहले दिक्कत था.
पहले you never had one view of your account statement. Now you have that.
Correct. And in this whole means entire segment, ये जो transaction banking word भी है, मुझे लगता है जो job role या job इसको heading बोलते हैं हम लोग, पहले नहीं था शायद, मुझे लगता है ना 2020 से पहले.
इससे पहले भी था, but it used to be used very very minimally. It's not very.
मैं जितने लोगों का मैंने ये देखा है job role actually 2020 के बाद ये बढ़ गया है.
Because that is when you started understanding that now to help your business grow, UPI explosion happened, right? Your payment started happening. Your payment reconciliation was very important. Your person-to-person payments happened. Person-to-merchant payments started happening. UPI became international. People globally started looking at UPI as another way of financial inclusion. So I think that is where it started actually getting traction in terms of transaction banking as a whole. But it was always there, but not visible, as I said in the beginning.
Interesting. But from your experience in this whole whatever past year experiences, which industry has been using this cash management or trade finance on the larger volume basis actually?
I think anybody who's into exports and imports,
They are into the larger.
they are into cash trade finance, and cash management is, again, I said, payables. So a lot of players in domestic market, any manufacturer, any businessman, any trader, any service guy would need these services. मतलब, whether it is intentional or unintentional, or whether he knows or he doesn't know, he will be using these services. What we do is we give a check, we said check clear हो जाएगा, but what is happening behind the check clearance?
अच्छा वो काम है.
Right, so that is transaction banking. That's operational piece of transaction banking.
ओके
right?
हम लोग जो बैंक में चेक जमा करके आ जाते हैं, जो हम लोग छोड़ देते हैं, फिर उसके बाद जो काम है आप
Correct.
करते हैं. ठीक है. एंड इज देयर एनी कोरिलेशन बिटवीन दिस ट्रेड फाइनेंस एंड सप्लाई चेन फाइनेंसिंग काइंड ऑफ अ थिंग? बोथ आर इन द कैटेगरी ऑफ ट्रांजैक्शन बैंकिंग ओनली, राइट?
Yeah. So trade finance is basically could be cross border and
Correct.
right.
That you
Supply chain in India right now we are doing only domestic.
Domestic.
Which is, right, but we are also we have Gift City coming up, which has been created by Government of India, where a lot of banks are putting up there. We are looking at supply chain on the dollar side also, that side in the foreign currency, but they are part of the, it's finance, whether it is cross border or domestic, we call it trade finance or supply chain, depending on how we want to choose it interchangeably.
ठीक है. हम लोगों ने बहुत सारे टर्म्स डिस्कस कर लिए हैं एंड मैं खुद कंफ्यूज हो गया हूँ थोड़ा सा. तो ऑब्वियसली ऑडियंस तो होगी, एक जेनरिक ऑडियंस जिसको फाइनेंस के बारे में नहीं पता वो और ज़्यादा हो जाएगी. इसी का लोग फ़ायदा उठा के कुछ ना कुछ करते रहते हैं, बहुत सारे वीडियो बनते हैं. एक पर्सन एक चीज़ के लिए वीडियो बनाता है तो दूसरा पर्सन उसी सेम चीज़ का वीडियो दूसरे नाम से बनाता है. सेम प्रोडक्ट्स के भी वैसे प्रॉब्लम्स आ चुके हैं कि फॉर एग्जांपल फाइनेंसिंग में लोग नाम रख दिए इनवॉइस डिस्काउंटिंग, बिल डिस्काउंटिंग. तो एज ओवरऑल ये डू यू फील कि दिस इज़ वेरी कंफ्यूजिंग एट टाइम्स फॉर एज अ नॉर्मल एंड यूजर लाइक मी?
It depends कि जो आपका एडवाइजर है, जो बैंक है, वो आपको कंफ्यूज करना चाह रहा है या आपको हेल्प
मेरे
करना
को
चाह रहा
बैंक
है.
तो कंफ्यूज नहीं करता है. बैंक का काम बहुत आसान है. मुझे लगता है आज के टाइम पे वो ज़्यादा कंफ्यूज नहीं करते हैं. पहले करते थे जब वो, अब क्योंकि मार्केट में वीडियोस बहुत बनते हैं, बहुत सारे इन्फ्लुएंसर्स है, बहुत सारे प्रोडक्ट्स है, एड्स चल रहे हैं, तो वहाँ पर अलग अलग टर्म्स होते हैं. सेम चीज़ का मैं नाम देख रहा हूँ, इनवॉइस डिस्काउंटिंग, सेम चीज़ का नाम बिल डिस्काउंटिंग, सेम चीज़ का नाम फाइनेंसिंग है. इन द एंड ऑफ द डे
सब कुछ सेम ही है.
तो डज इट थिंक कि थोड़ा और एजुकेशनल में वी नीड टू बी डायरेक्ट और लाइक डिफरेंट नेम्स आर ओके?
नहीं, आई थिंक यू आर राइट. थोड़ा आई थिंक अवेयरनेस एंड कस्टमर एजुकेशन इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, बिकॉज एज आई मेंशन कि there are also a lot of, as you mentioned, influencers are there in the market, right? There are a lot of middlemen in the market who try and get business from the client and take it to the bank by confusing the client, right? So I think intentionally it is all about what does customer want? Why does he need a finance? कि उसका working capital चलता रहे, he needs money at the time when he wants it the most, right? So it doesn't matter to him कि पैसा कैसे आ रहा है, as long as it's a genuine business, whether it's an invoice or a bill, or as long as the goods have been sold or bought, he needs to pay money or he needs to receive money.
Correct.
बस सिंपल है.
इसके पीछे सब कुछ है.
उसके पीछे सब कुछ है.
ठीक है. तो एनी काइंड ऑफ अ सिनेरियो लाइक विच यू थिंक कि सपोज एनी बिजनेसेस केम टू यू, वो ऑलरेडी बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स में था एंड यू हैव सीन देम हाउ दे गॉट सॉल्व्ड वाया डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ प्रोडक्ट्स और समथिंग लाइक दैट. कोई ऐसा सिनेरियो विद यू?
बहुत हमारे पास हर रोज के आते हैं, बहुत आते हैं, एंड कभी कभी बिकॉज ऑफ विच दे आर नॉट समटाइम नॉट बीइंग गिवन लिमिट्स आल्सो. बट I think issue is more about managing their working capital efficiently and ensuring that they don't pay too much of finance charges. ठीक है. So for example जैसे एक कस्टमर है, he's got limit और import करता है वो, ठीक है. अब जब वो import करता है कस्टमर, he can do import either by making payment through his working capital account, जहाँ पे उसको for example he pays 10%, ठीक है, right? But at the same time he can also import material by issuing an LC, letter of credit,
okay,
जिसपे उसका चार्ज है 1% per annum.
Okay.
ठीक है. उसके he can import material on that and on the due date make payment. Again that can be through his working capital account, but for the time when the LC was there, उसको उतना इंटरेस्ट कम पड़ता है. Instead of 9% 10% has to be only 1% per annum.
Okay.
Right, so he can save money there. And once you import,
but this LC can be utilized if you have sufficient balance in your account, right?
No, working capital limit दिया हुआ ना उसके अंदर, उसी का लिमिट है वो. वर्किंग कैपिटल लिमिट में उसका लिमिट है LC.
अच्छा, मैं ऑलरेडी वर्किंग कैपिटल लिमिट लिया है,
तो उसके अंदर मैं डाल सकता हूँ LC का लिमिट.
LC डाल सकता हूँ.
हाँ.
डायरेक्टली वर्किंग लिमिट ना यूटिलाइज करके अगर मैं डायरेक्ट यूटिलाइज करूँ तो 9-10% जो चलता है।
करेक्ट, इस पे 1% लगेगा आपको।
तो ये तो लोगों को पता ही नहीं है।
मतलब बहुत कम लोगों को नहीं मालूम होता है। कभी कभी ये होता है कि उनको मालूम होता है बट उनका सप्लायर वो एग्री नहीं करता उसके लिए, बट दैट इज पार्ट ऑफ द पीपल शुड नो अबाउट इट। दूसरा, क्योंकि आप क्रॉस बॉर्डर में यूज़ करते हैं तो आपका करेंसी इन्वॉल्व रहता है, डॉलर या यूरो या जीबीपी, तो देयर लॉट ऑफ फ्लक्चुएशन विच हैपेंस, तो पीपल डोंट हेज, वो हेजिंग नहीं करते हैं उसको। हेजिंग मतलब जैसे आप इंश्योरेंस कवर लेते हैं, आप टुडे हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस है या लाइफ इंश्योरेंस है, एज अ सेफ गार्ड फॉर योर लाइफ, एज अ सेफ गार्ड हेल्थ, कि इन केस समथिंग हैपन्स। इसी तरह से करेंसी में भी यही होता है कि कभी कभी करेंसी मूव बाय 5%, इतना तो आपका मार्जिन ही नहीं होता है आपकी सेल में। तो कस्टमर्स डोंट हेज ऑल्सो, या वो सोचते नहीं हम हेज नहीं करेंगे, ऐसी विल कीप इट ओपन। So sometime it can work in their favor, sometime it can actually go very bad and the entire profitability of the customer can get eroded. So वो भी कस्टमर नहीं hedge करते हैं, उनको समझाना पड़ता है, right? Sometimes they want to make it a speculation, which is not the, you're not in the business of speculation. आप business में हैं ताकि आप पैसा बना सकें,
Correct.
right? या अपना पैसा बचा सकें आप। Third is कि lot of customers do not know कि अगर आपने कुछ import किया है, you can also avail low cost funding at about 5-6%.
ओके,
वो भी कस्टमर को नहीं मालूम होता।
ये कैसे होता है?
सो वो अगर आपने कुछ इंपोर्ट किया, आई कैन गिव हिम फंडिंग लिंक टू डॉलर और यूरो, जिसका रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट इंडिया के रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट से बहुत कम है।
ओके, ये फैसिलिटी अवेलेबल है?
या बिल्कुल अवेलेबल है ये। सो ये भी एक तरीका है वेर यू कैन सेव योर मनी एंड यू कैन इंश्योर दैट योर प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी कैन इम्प्रूव। सो ये बहुत सी चीज़ें ऐसी हैं जो कस्टमर को नहीं मालूम होता है। जैसे एक्सपोर्टर है, अब तो गवर्नमेंट ने वो स्कीम बंद कर दी सबवेंशन वाला, बट जब चल रही थी स्कीम, लॉट ऑफ पीपल डिडंट नो दैट दे कैन गेट 3% इंटरेस्ट सबवेंशन फ्रॉम द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया।
पर मिलता है वो लोगों को?
मिलता है, बैंक के थ्रू मिलता है।
नहीं, जैसे वो स्टार्टअप इंडिया वाला जो टैक्स एग्जेम्पशन है, हमें नहीं मिलता है सबको, इसलिए पूछ रहा था।
सो दैट आई विल नॉट बी एबल टू कमेंट ऑन
हाँ,
दैट, बट एक्सपोर्ट्स में
मिलता है।
अगर आपके डॉक्यूमेंटेशन बिल्कुल ठीक है आपकी और बैंक ने पास ऑन किया है, कस्टमर को मिला है, तो आपको मिलता था उस टाइम पे भी, अभी भी है इन सम फॉर्म और शेप।
पर ये सारी चीज़ों का अवेयरनेस ऑन द लाइक, अगर मैं जेनरिक टर्म पे सर्च करूँ गूगल पे कहीं भी, तो ये इतना ज़्यादा नहीं है। क्यों
नहीं है, बट वो क्या है, वो टर्मिनोलॉजी ऐसे यूज़ कर देते हैं ना हम लोग कि हम कंफ्यूज हो जाते हैं उसके अंदर।
अच्छा,
लॉट ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट कस्टमर जिनको सबवेंशन स्कीम के बारे में मालूम है, पैसा मिलता है उनको, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया इस मामले में उन्होंने दिया है पैसा, इज ऑल टू सपोर्ट द एक्सपोर्टर्स। एंड वैसे भी कंपटीशन इतना है मार्केट ग्लोबली, so government of India had to support the exporters also, so they came with the subvention scheme for MSMEs who were into exports, and even people who were not in MSMEs were into exports, उनको भी 2% सबवेंशन दिया था गवर्नमेंट ने।
इन रेगुलेशंस और मतलब स्कीम्स मेजॉरिटी जब वो गवर्नमेंट में निकालती हैं, तो एक्सपोर्टर्स और इंपोर्टर्स के लिए ज़्यादा निकालते हैं इंडिया में?
नहीं, सबके लिए है। तो MSME ओवरऑल के लिए भी गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया की बहुत स्कीम है,
भले वो एक्सपोर्ट ना करे।
हाँ, चाहे वो एक्सपोर्ट ना भी करे, एक्सपोर्ट के लिए स्पेसिफिक स्कीम थी, बट अदरवाइज ऑल्सो MSMEs के लिए गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया की बहुत स्कीम्स हैं, विच बैंक्स कीप टेलिंग दी। बट आई थिंक यू आर राइट, कुछ जगहों पे अवेयरनेस एंड एजुकेशन का बहुत ज़रूरत है, विच नीड्स टू बी डन, एंड एवरी प्लेयर इन द इकोसिस्टम हैज टू प्ले इट्स पार्ट, वेदर इट इज़ बैंक्स, वेदर इज गवर्नमेंट, वेदर कोई एसोसिएशन है, वेदर RBI है, जो भी है, एवरीबडी हैज टू प्ले इट्स पार्ट।
लोग ना इन्वेस्टमेंट के टिप्स तो बता देते हैं सब लोग, पैसे बचाने वाले टिप्स नहीं बताते हैं। बस दिक्कत वो है कि आप 60 साल के हो जाओगे तो आप करोड़पति कैसे बनोगे, वो सबको पता है, बट जब आप 30 साल के हो तो पैसे कैसे बचाओगे वो नहीं बताते हैं लोग।
नहीं, आई थिंक अब वो भी थोड़ा हो रहा है,
हो रहा है,
इट टेक्स टाइम। मतलब अब देखिए, अब एवरीथिंग इज अवेलेबल ऑन द नेट, ठीक है, एवरीथिंग। आप अगर आपको कुछ भी क्वेरी, यू पुट इट ऑन ChatGPT या आप जेमिनी पे डाल दो या आप किस पे डाल दो, आपको कुछ रिस्पॉन्स मिल जाता है।
आप यूज़ करते हो अपने रेगुलर लाइफ में डे टू डे बेसिस में कोई भी AI टूल्स?
So we have, for me as individual or as a
individual,
मतलब I use it but I don't want to be dependent on that.
हाँ,
ठीक है, and also you need to know कि किस तरह के सवाल पूछने हैं आपको. If you ask the right question to any of these models, you will get the answer. But you should not be dependent only on that. Practical experience. Sometimes I have seen, sometimes they also don't give a response which is correct, or sometimes they also don't give an updated response. Sometimes when you talk to them, they only give you a response. Today, they will give you a response dated 31st of March 2024.
करेक्ट, ये फाइनेंशियल्स में ज़्यादा होता है।
हाँ, राइट। जबकि FY25 भी निकल गया है और Q1 का रिजल्ट भी आ गया है, so they will still give you FY24.
ये फिनटेक में, फाइनेंस सेक्टर में सबसे ज़्यादा है।
करेक्ट। सो मैं तो since I'm in that part of the industry, तो मुझे उस हिसाब से देखता हूँ मैं। But I think you should also use your own
ब्रेन।
on this.
नहीं यार, people who have been in the market, I always say them कि brain is the most important part. भले AI आ जाए, कुछ भी आ जाए, but you like over, चलो ठीक है, we have understood maximum things about transaction banking, but कुछ फिर भी is there anything else which is a very important aspect of transaction banking और जो एकदम forefront पे नहीं आता है? Like people are not seeing that in day-to-day use case, but backend में वो function बहुत regular use होता है banks में.
ट्रांजेक्शन मॉनिटरिंग इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि किस तरह की ट्रांजेक्शन हो रही हैं, गलत हो रही हैं, ठीक हो रही हैं, AML हो रहा है, एंटी मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग हो रहा है, कंप्लायंस ठीक से फॉलो हो रहा है, नहीं हो रहा है, राइट. फॉर एग्जांपल टुडे इफ़ यू वांट बाय यूजिंग दिस टेक्नोलॉजिकल टूल्स, टुडे यू कैन रीड अ ट्रेड इनवॉइस और अ ट्रेड डॉक्यूमेंट विद इन मिनट्स एंड आवर्स, जो जिसको पहले दो दिन लगते थे पहले.
2 दिन?
हाँ.
वो ट्रेड डॉक्यूमेंट क्या क्या होता है ऐसे?
जैसे फॉर आपने LC है, फॉर एग्जांपल यू इशूड एन LC जिसको कंफर्म करी है आपने, राइट. LC कंफर्म किया विच मीन्स आई एज अ बैंक इज एग्रीइंग टू पे दी अदर बैंक द पेमेंट.
करेक्ट.
ठीक है. नाउ व्हेन आई हैव डन दैट, आई हैव टू एंश्योर दैट डॉक्यूमेंट्स हैव टू बी
Proper.
checked properly, right. For that it will pass through 2 or 3 people, right. तो उसमें टाइम तो लगेगा आपका. But there are certain tools which have come in the market which can help you understand कि ये जो LCAs के जो डॉक्यूमेंट सबमिट हुए हैं वो डिस्क्रिपेंट हैं या नहीं है. That can happen in few minutes or few hours.
ये होने लगा है.
ये हो रहा है.
तो
this is something-
ये रेगुलर बेसिस में रोज होता है maximum.
मतलब people have started using it. It's not scalable right now, but it takes time to, because for any technological evolution to happen on trade finance side, उसके लिए आपको डेटा बहुत चाहिए. You have to feed that data into the model to understand कि किस तरह की discrepancies आ रही हैं, right? So big banks and a lot of people who are in the market have started using it, but I'm sure in the next 2-3 years it will become scalable. But ये हो रहा है backend पे.
अच्छा. And जैसे जैसे like we are moving forward, like number of people doing transaction is increasing, number of people using accounts anything, be it right from A to Z, people, it has been increasing day by day. And similarly frauds or
वो भी बढ़ रहे हैं.
threats
वो भी बढ़
सब
रहे
हो
हैं.
रहे हैं. तो like how does one banking or a banking body ensure कि ये सब चीज़ें हमें रेगुलर चेक रखना है? मतलब क्या चीज़ इंश्योर करते हैं वो?
So we have different people in the system to ensure that. Second is you have to also ensure the transaction pattern of the customer. अगर the transaction itself is not wrong, the behavior of the customer it will give you early warning signal कि ये कुछ गड़बड़ कर रहा है.
मान लो मैं ठीक हूँ, मैं जिसको पेमेंट किया वो ठीक नहीं है, तो
So there are certain, so ठीक in terms आपने तो पेमेंट कर दिया, you know कि अब पेमेंट कर दिया आपने, but it also depends कि whether your payment that you're doing is in line with your line of business of the past. Historically वो data same है या नहीं है. For example आपको पता है कि आप हर हफ्ते आप you make X amount of payment to 10 different beneficiaries.
ठीक है.
If you're using X plus 2, no problem because business can go up and down on X minus 2. But it becomes 20X. Then it's not in line with the pattern of transaction which you were doing earlier.
तो इसमें क्या फिर वो चेक करते हैं या मुझे कॉल करेंगे, क्या होगा?
So then they will pass it on to their compliance team and other teams to monitor that, and then they will either put you on hold or they will evaluate कि क्या हो रहा है, or they will come back and ask you.
सपोज मैं आज मान लो मंथली का फॉर एग्जांपल 1 करोड़ का कोई ट्रांजेक्शन कर रहा है, अचानक से मेरे 10 करोड़ 15 करोड़ आ गए अकाउंट में, तो फिर
they will come and ask.
दिल का मैंने
पूछ सकते हैं आपसे जनरली आर विल कम एंड आस्क क्या बात, पैसा कहाँ से आ रहा है.
मैं बोल रहा हूँ क्लाइंट बढ़ गए मेरे, तो
वो तो प्रूफ ऑब्वियसली यू विल फिगर आउट ना. तो आज आप बोल दोगे अल्टीमेटली यू विल गेट फिगर्ड
so
आउट.
scenario gets worse अगर वो पैसे किसी और सोर्स से आ रहे हैं, यू डोंट हैव एनी प्रूफ.
सो सोर्स ऑफ फंड्स अगर आपका इशू है, राइट, आपका व्हाट इज मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग टुडे, व्हाट इज हवाला टुडे, यही है कि आपको पता ही नहीं पैसा कहाँ से आ रहा है.
ओके, सो दैट इज व्हाट इट इज.
So that is a lot of UN sanctions also there on the transactions you do overseas.
Over the years, like so it's been so many years, like how you yourself has been transformed, managing teams, leadership qualities, क्या मतलब कोई ऐसा, अब अगर जेंजीज भी आ गए मार्केट में तो आपको मजा आता है उनसे? कभी आपने डील किया है कोई टीम में हो जो जेंजी हो?
हाँ, रोज डील करते हैं. हमारी टीम में है, वी हैव पीपल हु आर यंग इन द टीम हु जस्ट जॉइंड फ्रॉम देयर कैंपसेस, फ्रॉम देयर कॉलेजेस.
तो आपको कैसा डील करने में क्या मजा आता है कि आपको लगता है कि
so देखिए, you have to respect the individual per se, right? So and if you approach that individual with the perspective you can learn something from him or her, it will always help you. Well, they have their own perspective, right? And since they are a lot more used to using digital tools, and they will be able to give you a lot more perspective and a lot more insight as to what the customer of their age and their thought process think and how it has to happen. So I think it is very important, and as a leader, you also have to ensure that you empower them.
Correct.
Right, to empower them to understand. So, for example, in transaction banking, if I look, I said there are multiple players in that. You have operations, you have finance, you have compliance, you have RM, and so all have to work together, come and work together, right? So to create an environment which is collaborative among all the stakeholders, so that people can take ownership कि काम हो जाएगा, and they can come together and work together कि this is what needs to be delivered. So उसके लिए empowerment is very important, and once you give empowerment, the team gets motivated.
Do freshers get a chance to work in this segment of transaction banking?
Obviously, देखिए, when I started my career, I did not know anything about transaction
But
banking.
आपने पहले काम किया हुआ था ना 10-15 साल
No,
बाद.
so one is, so when I started my career in 1999, this was my first job, fresh from campus. So किसी ने तो काम दिया ही था मेरे को.
नहीं, वो कोई बिजनेसेस ऐसे होते हैं जो फ्रेशर हायर कर लिया, जैसे कि यहाँ पर
We also hire.
बैंक्स विल हायर.
Yeah, we also
बैंक
hire.
में किसी सेगमेंट में हायर कर लिया, बट बैंक के अंदर कोई ट्रांजैक्शन बैंकिंग में फ्रेशर हायर हो जाते हैं.
हाँ, बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
क्योंकि एज पर जितना हमने डिस्कस किया है, तो मुझे ऐसा लगा कि इसमें समवन नीड्स टू हैव द नॉलेज एक्चुअली.
So today, somebody who is not there with knowledge कैसे आएगा वो? उसको जब तक वो काम नहीं करेगा, they will not dirty their hands and they will not get involved. You will not be able to learn. So today, I did not know anything about trade finance up till 2008. So you got an opportunity, you learned, and then you started ensuring that you continue to build the team accordingly, ensure that you hire people accordingly. So today, and also I may not know all the answers. You hire people who can, go through RBI circulars, get a little more perspective, and then give you a little more response and a little more answers on that. So it's a teamwork. ऐसा नहीं है कि you will never get anybody ready-made in the market who knows transaction banking in and out.
This is the last question, I'll be ending with this. For the India story, what we see, India story as of today, what is one thing which makes you very happy seeing that this thing has evolved over the times? Anything which made you very happy that कि हाँ ये हो गया, जैसे मुझे क्या होता है कि क्लाइंट का पैसा आ गया मैं खुश हो जाता हूँ. तो आपके साथ ऐसा कोई सिनेरियो जो ऐसा लगा हो कि दिस ओवर द टाइम्स ये मैंने चेंज देखा है और इट इज़ वेरी गुड चेंज?
I think over the time the adoption of digital in India, technology in India has been very, very democratized. It's not limited to only few people. It is now across every person, every strata of people, चाहे वो बिजनेस छोटा हो, बड़ा हो, या वो he's a street hawker या vegetable vendor हो या कोई बड़ा shop हो, everybody is using UPI, everybody is using digital infrastructure in India, right? So I think that becomes the backbone of the next jump or the leap that the country is going to take, because a lot of countries overseas are beginning to follow that now. We have reached a stage जहाँ पे हम लोग महीने का we do about 20 billion transactions a month, right? UPI में. This is only UPI. Now within UPI also we can see which kind of customers are doing what kind of transactions, right? Similarly, we'll see a lot of things happening on trade finance now, because government is going to come up with initiatives on digitizing the trade finance business, because trade finance is still very, very paper based, very, very manual. But I think I'm sure the kind of growth and the kind of jump that we've seen in digital understanding and transformation in the last so many years, 4-5 years, I think with the same pace we continue to grow, I'm sure we'll be a much better and a much stronger economy going forward.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being
here.
Thank
you, Rishav.
Thank you so much for agreeing here, coming from Mumbai and to Bangalore, shooting this with me.
Thank you.
With this, guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode.